Oh.
They didn't put them on.
I think it's now live.
Yeah, we're live.
Yeah.
We are. Number of participants is going up.
13.
Hi, everybody.
Yeah, if you're watching
Hello.
at the moment, we're just waiting for more people to join us and then we'll get started. But hi, and thank you for coming.
24 now. It's going up fast.
Yeah, good.
26.
People are punctual, that's a good thing.
28.
Everyone's very on time.
Hello, 28 people. 30.
It's only a minute past.
I know.
Give it
And
a
I don't know
little
how
bit.
quickly it is, you know, people have to be accepted into it, don't they?
I think so. They've all got links.
Yeah, but you click on the
through.
link and you have, well, I don't know.
Yeah, maybe if they're in a waiting room.
Talking
Yeah.
about really.
22,
Yes, that's
still
what I
going
mean.
up.
It's very exciting.
It is.
No, this is great. We give it 34. Should we give it another minute or?
So is your computer working again, Heather?
I'm working again. Yes.
Your computer's working again after
Everything's
the
good.
tractor went through the...
No internet disasters today. Fingers crossed.
Is that your whole neighbourhood? We're all up with, we're off.
No, just me, just our house.
Oh yeah.
For anybody that's listening out there, any of the guests coming along, we're very lucky to have Hazel tonight because a tractor drove over her broadband cable earlier this week. But yay, you're back. It's good.
It's all good.
Shall we get started?
Yeah.
So hello,
Yeah.
everybody. I can see there's still some more of you coming in, but I'm going to start. I mean, none of these ladies need an introduction, but I'm going to do a tiny little introduction to them before we get going. But first of all, welcome to our historical happy hour. And I hope you've all got your cocktails with you. We certainly have.
Yes. Cheers, Jill. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Publication.
So in my
great.
top left, I don't know where everybody's appearing for everybody else, we've got the amazing Dinah Jefferies, the Sunday Times best-selling author of 6 novels set in the Far East in colonial times, full of steamy heat and exotic flora and fauna and feisty heroines. And for her latest novel, The Tuscan Contessa, have you got that with you, Dinah? Just wave it around. She's moved to Italy and to the Second World War. So that's quite a big change of scene for Dinah, and I'm sure we'll be talking later about why she made that decision. And then we have Tracy Rees here, who's she won the Richard and Judy Prize with the extraordinary novel, the first novel prize with the amazing Amy Snow. And I think you've published 4 novels since then.
Yes.
And the latest one is called The House at Silvermore, but I always call it the coal novel because it's set in Yorkshire coal mines. But what I have to say about Tracy's writing, for anybody that's not familiar with it, is that you love her characters straight away. You read 2 pages and you're so gripped by the characters that you just have to keep going to find out what's happening. And I challenge you all, pick up any of Tracy's novels and try this and you'll see what I mean.
Oh, well, thank you, Jill. And of course, I don't have a copy of the book next to me because I'm so sensible, but I have a card with the cover on. Good. So that's what it looks like.
So Hazel Gaynor and I both write about real historical characters and real historical events, but she weaves in a lot of fiction to make her stories really compelling. And so she's, and she's, by the way, big kudos, she's a New York Times best-selling author, which is amazing. Woo! And so you've written about fairies in The Cottingley Secret, you've written about Grace Darling in The Lighthouse Keeper's Daughter. But the latest book, Bird in the Bamboo Cage, is about some British children and their teachers who got interned in a Japanese prisoner of war camp during World War II. It's a true story, and it's absolutely, it's just gripping, and I recommend that you rush out and buy this straight away. So then there's me, and it's my publication day today for this one.
Yay.
I like writing novels about usually 20th century women who maybe have been overlooked by the history books or unfairly judged by the history books. And certainly a couple of the characters in this come into that category. I also like to have a tangled love story at the heart of my novels. And this certainly has that in spades. But, you know, this one is it's about Jackie Kennedy, the ex-president's wife. It's about Maria Callas, the opera singer, and about the way that they became rivals for the affections of a Greek shipping millionaire called Aristotle Onassis. So we'll be talking more about that later. The Second Marriage, my new book. Thank you.
Jill, can I just say, I've just looked at the comments, which for me are just bang in the middle of the screen, not at the side. And there's
Dinah.
And so it's very weird, but there's someone from Kentucky,
That's
someone
wonderful.
from Pennsylvania, someone from Ohio,
North Carolina, yay!
North Carolina,
North
Iowa.
Carolina.
Oh, hi everybody.
That's so cool.
I was going to start, before we get into the serious business of talking about writing, of just asking everybody about the cocktails that they've brought along today.
Very important.
Dinah, where's yours from? Have you got a story behind it?
Okay, mine's from Malaysia, where I was born and where I lived until I was nearly 9. And it is a coconut lemonade. And it's coconut water, sparkling water, and lime juice.
Gorgeous.
Delicious.
Looks like milk. But
Hazel's actually got a purple cocktail.
I
She's the cocktail queen.
Wow.
So purple's my favourite colour, so that's part of the reason. This is an aviation, and it's the most beautiful, you won't be surprised to hear, gin-based cocktail. It's gin and a violet liqueur and maraschino liqueur, a dash of lemon, shaken with ice. And it's absolutely, if you like the taste of violet, if you liked those Parma violet sweets when you were little, I can highly, this is like a grown-up Parma violet sweet. It's absolutely delicious. So an aviation.
Nice.
Wow.
Can I just say hello
That's
to
elaborate.
Joanna? Can I just say hello
Sure.
to Joanna, who is in Cheltenham?
And also Julie Boone and Linda Hill, I've just noticed.
Yeah,
Yeah, hi
Wonderful. Hi
guys.
guys. Tracy, what's your drink?
So I'm being a classic today, and I've got a margarita.
Ooh.
I used to be, in another life, I used to be a cocktail bartender, and I used to pride myself on making the perfect margarita. So just very quickly, I've brought props, my cocktail shaker, a lime, Jose Cuervo gold tequila. So one must always use gold tequila for the perfect margarita, not silver, I'm sorry. And also Grand Marnier.
Wow.
Not triple sec.
Okay.
That's amazing.
And then also margarita mix, but I didn't actually have any, so I've just used a lot of lime juice. So it's very sour and
Delicious.
salty and just wonderful.
very
Oh my
potent.
gosh. Well, mine is, and I had to do this, Hazel. This is a French 75 because Hazel introduced me to them in the American bar at the Savoy. And it's gin, champagne, lemon juice, and sugar syrup. And unfortunately, I didn't have champagne, so it's flat Prosecco instead. And I didn't make a very good job of doing the lemon twist, but it is delicious. So cheers, everybody.
Cheers.
Cheers. Cheers.
And I hope
Cheers.
everybody
Thank you all for
watching
coming.
has got a drink as well. I wondered if we should start by talking about how you come up with the idea for the next novel. Do you look at the market? Are you aware of having a particular brand, a particular type of novel that readers look to you for? Or do you just write whatever comes to you? Do whatever you feel like writing? I mean, do you want to start, Dinah, by telling us why you moved your novels from the Far East to Italy this time?
I think 6 novels in the Far East was enough, you know. I think for most writers anyway, you want to keep being challenged by what you're doing. You want to feel fresh with what you're doing. You want to have excitement for what you're doing. And for me, 6 novels was it. And I think if I tried to do another one, I wouldn't have been excited by it. So for me, it was just time for a change. And Tuscany was completely accidental. I hadn't decided what the change was going to be, but we were staying in in August in a beautiful house in northern Tuscany in the mountains. And on the very first day, I twisted my ankle. I fell and twisted my ankle. So I had lots of time with my feet up just to read all the stuff in the house while everyone else was in the pool. And I found out about the Second World War in Tuscany, which I didn't know much about. Yeah. So it sort of went from there. I started to be fascinated by it. I came home, I did the research. I think it was Margaret Atwood who said, you know, if you do the research, you find the things you want to write about. You may not know in the beginning, but as you write, little things crop up, and you can go with them or not, you know. So I think really it was just the way things often are. It was completely by accident.
I mean, the Second World War is perennially popular at the moment, isn't it? Both you and Hazel are writing about the war. Hazel, how did you find your story for Bird in the Bamboo Cage?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've picked up where Dinah left off, because I've gone from writing novels predominantly set in Europe to China. So I think
the other way around.
Swapped geography. And similarly, I hadn't written a novel set in World War II. And I think there is that natural curiosity. I'd written about World War I. I'd read a lot of fiction set in World War II, and just was amazed by the breadth of the stories that people were writing about and the experiences. And I came to The Bird in the Bamboo Cage, or for those of you in America, When We Were Young and Brave, hence the swapping of books at the start. I first heard that story through a podcast which told this incredible true story of a group of school children and their teachers in China who were occupied by the Japanese army, and the school collectively were taken to an internment camp. And I just thought this was such a fascinating and unknown story of the war in the Pacific. And I had an interest in the Second World War because I'd been given some letters that my great-grandmother wrote to her son, who was fighting for the British Army and went missing in action. And that family connection to the war really affected me, and I really wanted to write a story of war and separation, and that really is what came together in The Bird in the Bamboo Cage. So a real departure for me geographically and historically, and I've just absolutely loved every minute of it.
Yeah. Oh, that's terrific. Tracy, where did House at Silvermore come from? Just out of your head?
Yeah, so the original spark of an idea actually came from my agent several years before I wrote the book, and she sent me a book called Black Diamonds, which is a factual book about the South Yorkshire coalfield and its sort of mighty power and then demise. And she said, I really think that someone should write a great coal mining novel, and I think it should be you. But I was really excited by the idea, not least because my own grandfather used to be a coal miner, but in South Wales, not in Yorkshire. But at first, I was too daunted to kind of jump in, and I had other ideas. And as Dinah said earlier, you have to be excited about what you write. So it was just kind of bubbling away in the back of my mind while I wrote other things. And then the time came where I thought, yeah, I'm ready to write the coal novel. And so I started doing research. I went up to Yorkshire. I went down a number of mines, which, you know, was a fairly terrifying experience, just emotionally. Obviously, logically, you know that it's now a tourist attraction and you're perfectly safe, but still the emotional experience of being that far underground in a darkness that is not like any other. The whole journey really brought a lot of things up for me, and obviously all the reading that I did about how the gentry who owned the coal mines actually very often treated the people that worked for them in the mines, and what the miners and their families went through. I mean, it's saga. You wouldn't believe it if you didn't think it was true. So it was very easy from that point for my characters to start coming alive, and for me to imagine their particular trials and tribulations.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's so brave, going down a coal mine. I don't know if I could do that. I think it's too claustrophobic.
It wasn't an easy book to write, I have to say, because for a lot of the time the characters are suffering, and so of course I'm suffering with them.
Oh.
It was challenging.
Yeah.
What about you, Gill?
For researching The Second Marriage, which Hazel has reminded me I should be showing the American cover as well, which is called Jackie and Maria. And my research trip involved going to the Greek islands, Tracy, not down a coal mine. I had to go out to the Ionian Islands on a motorboat and zoom round Onassis's private island of Scorpios. And I saw as well. It's a terrible life. It's really hard. The idea for writing about the Jackie and Maria and Onassis was actually suggested to me by a reader in Athens. I do get people writing to me because I sort of zip around and I address, I mean, it's, as I said, it's mostly women in the 20th century that I feel that there's something new to say about their story or something that I want to explore about their story. And she wrote to me, Barbara Duker, her name is, and she wrote to me, she said, why not write this story, the Onassis story, that it's a love triangle, basically. And instantly, I just loved the idea. I just thought, it's got everything I want, a really tangled love affair, people behaving incredibly badly. But at the heart of it, two women that I was always really fascinated by, Jackie Kennedy and Maria Callas. So I just knew I wanted to do it. But actually, what I do, just to be commercially minded, is I've got a big notebook that I keep loads of ideas of people that I might want to write about in the future. And when I finish one book, I'll send my editor a list of usually about 5 ideas, just a paragraph on each, and say, well, which one do you want? And with Jackie and Maria, she just said straight away, yeah, no, I want that one. So that's what I wrote. But do you think you have to be commercially minded? Or have you got an eye to the market? Or are you just thinking, this is the story I want to tell?
I don't think about the market at all, because the market is insane. You know, 1 minute it's one thing, next minute it's something else. And by the time, if you're looking at the market, by the time you've written your book, it will be gone. I don't know, maybe there are ways of being more commercially minded, but I don't do that. I don't know if other people do.
I think I agree. I think you've got to, publishing works in such long cycles, really, and this is, if I ever talk to writers looking for advice, that don't follow the market, because by the time your book is written and published, the market has moved on.
I know, and the thing is, you can only, sorry, did I go?
No, it's fine, go.
I think you have to be just individually really excited and curious about the idea, and that thing you've said, Gill, about having several ideas. And I think you need that, I call it percolation time, where maybe you're interested in 4 or 5 ideas, but you need to let them sit for a while, because not all ideas actually convert into a whole 100,000-word novel. They're just an interesting dinner party anecdote, as my friends will tell you. So I think you've got that sort of cooking time of an idea to see, does it have legs? Is there enough in it to sustain your interest? And a reader as well.
And also, what I was going to say was, I would really like to write what they call uplift book, but it's just not me. And also, someone asked recently on another Zoom thing, would you ever write a psychological thriller or a crime? And I just wouldn't know where to start. I really, really wouldn't. I mean, I like an element of mystery in my stories, and I like a dark edge, which I'm getting more and more with each book. And there's certainly quite a dark edge in the Tuscan Contessa, when they're fighting against the Nazi occupiers, and the women have joined the resistance. And so that's who I am. I can only write me. I know there are some writers that can turn their hands to sorts of different kinds of things, but I don't think I'm one of them. I think I can only do me.
Never say never. She'll be murdering people in her next book.
No, there is murder in my Tuscan Contessa. But it's murder,
Dinah style murder.
Yeah, it's not the guy in the next door in his cellar. I don't know, with a cut up body or something like that. It's not like that.
I think I could write a historical crime if I came upon the right story, but it's very complicated, the crime market, isn't it? It's got, you know, there's all these different categories of police procedural and domestic noir, and
I know.
I think you have to be very careful about where you're positioned in
Yeah.
these. Maybe writing a historical one. Would you do that, Tracy? Would you write a crime?
No. No, that's exactly as Dinah said. That's not me. I'm very, very character driven, and I love really getting into the psychology of the characters. For me, they just kind of live in my head, so I don't have to think about how do I build this character, because they're like real people, but just in here. It's probably a bit worrying.
Don't you think sorry, I keep doing this.
So for me, the real interest when I'm writing is just in any given situation, how are people responding? What are they doing? What are they choosing or not choosing, and why? And I just think ordinary life, everyday life, is so tough and so interesting, that for me, I don't want to look any further. I don't want to go into some sort of extreme situation like a crime, because it's just not what I resonate with. But as Hazel said, never say never, because we're all growing and developing and changing all the time. So maybe in 10 years I will, but not for now.
I think it's instinct, isn't it? And it's interesting when you see authors change genre, and I'm always really fascinated by that. But I think you just have to trust your gut, and if something is talking to you, and I completely agree with you, Tracy, it's that sort of fascination almost with the ordinary. And you know, I often find even in these extraordinary, I think we've all set our books in extraordinary, really historical situations, or with extraordinary people like Jackie and Maria, but it's also drilling down into what are the very relatable parts of that person or that story. So we're all driven by the same, really, you know, fear, love, grief, envy, all of those human emotions that are what I think connect a reader to a piece of history. You know, people are wearing different clothes and moving around, but it's that universal human condition that connects all of us. And I think that's interesting to me, the ordinary in the extraordinary.
I mean, all four of us write about women who were held back by, you know, the particular periods in which they lived, by the laws, by their husband, you know, having control of everything, by society, you know, not being able to work. Is that something that you're aware of when you're writing? Whoever wants to answer that.
I think so.
Thinking about these women who just can't do everything that we might be able to do in the 21st century.
I think that's part of the challenge in a way about writing about the 20th century, because so much changed in the 1960s, and so much changed after the First World War. For a while, you know, skirts went up, women had a certain amount of freedom, and they had a certain amount of freedom in the Second World War as well, and then had to go back to the kitchen afterwards. And I think we're all aware that it was a century of immense change for women, including getting the vote and all that. But of course, you know, the fight has not been won yet. And I don't know really how much is happening these days compared to how much change happened in the past. And so in a way, for me, I'm more comfortable with writing about women in the past because I experienced some of it, you know, when I was growing up in the 1950s. And so, you know, to kind of have women who have got limitations and restrictions and how they manage to break through them, I find fascinating.
I agree, and I think also what I see happening a lot with historical novels that feature a strong woman sort of almost out of her time, but maybe not out of her time. And I think we forget, you know, there's lots of stereotypes, isn't there, and cliches of all Victorian women do is faint. And, you know, and there's these cliches. And of course, there were people who didn't follow convention, who didn't do what they were supposed to do. And isn't that where we dive in as a novelist and go, aha, we haven't really thought about the rebels of Victorian society or what the trailblazers in those
suffragettes,
bright young things into war years, and that's brilliant fodder, if you like, for a novelist. What's different? Who were the different people? That's what we want to know. And women written out of history a lot of the time. So
absolutely, yeah.
Who was brave and who was courageous and who was resilient. Resilience, I think that's a really important quality. And I always try to make my female characters resilient, because I think it's something we admire as people, you know, people who actually survive, who, you know, who go through stuff, but get there in the end, you know, who face difficulties and still have hope and goodness and love.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because that's the quality that makes a difference between just kind of disappearing from life and actually really turning things around. And I'm very aware of all of the things that you've been talking about when I'm writing as well. It is brilliant fodder, and you know, in terms of stories or narratives needing conflict to drive them, you know, the forbidden is a huge one. That was very much a theme in the house at Silvermore, because the miners were brought up to that life and forbidden basically any other choices. And when it comes to women, so much was forbidden for so long. And it's sort of just pick your character and start telling a story, really.
And I'm telling the stories of real women quite often, and it's very important to understand the era when I'm trying to put myself into their shoes and figure out why they made the decisions they made. You need to think about the era. When I wrote about the Romanov girls, the Russian royal family, I had to remember that they were very religious in a way that, you know, that wouldn't come into decision making nowadays in the same way. But with Jackie Kennedy, I had lots of questions that I wanted to answer for myself when I started writing about her. You know, why did she stay with John F. Kennedy when he was cheating on her on an industrial scale? And then you look at the era and the class that she came from, and you just didn't really divorce. You know, there's part of the answer there. And then you wonder, why did she marry Onassis? And you know, yes, she did partly marry for money. She married for the safety that she thought his money could bring her. But because women didn't work and she didn't have an inheritance from her family, if she wanted the lifestyle and, you know, to keep up the shopping habit that she very clearly had, then she had to marry somebody with money. That's just, so it's you have to keep the era in mind when you're writing about them, because that's where their mindset came from, even if they did manage to transcend it themselves.
And even I think if it feels a little awkward to us now, you know, you're sort of writing a response or a reaction from a woman that's historically authentic, but sometimes you almost cringe a little bit now, you know, to think how they were, you know, handled by men in their lives, what their expectations were, as you say, the limits that people had. And I think there's always that slight juggle, isn't there, between historical authenticity and something that may just jar a little bit with a reader, and I think it's an interesting balance for us in this particular era. I think writing women's history is a balance.
I mean, I keep finding that I mean, I'm writing my I can't think which, 9th, but I'm waiting for the edits on my 8th. And I kept getting comments about, shouldn't she have more agency here? So it's very easy when you're writing about women in the past to actually forget they need agency to make a good story. Otherwise they're passive. He decides, not her, you know. And actually I've always been a complete rebel. And so I find it odd that I'm sometimes forgetting to give my women enough agency in their own lives and in their own story, whatever the time period, you know, because you don't really, I don't anyway, want to read about passive women very much.
No.
Well, I think somebody who has agency, who defies society's conventions, who takes ownership and control, that's really interesting, isn't it? In any era.
In any era,
So I think that does naturally fit with an interesting reading experience, because we do want to read about people who are different and challenge things, and they're like you, Dinah, they're rebels.
Rebels. I don't know why I just was. I was born that way.
Oh,
And it's now come out in my
wonderful.
granddaughter, I might say, who's approaching 13 and has really got a few ideas of her own, way above her years.
Listen, I just want to say to everybody watching that we can see your amazing questions coming in down the side, and we will be dealing with them. What do you think, another 10 minutes, ladies? Should we?
I have no idea what.
Yeah, God, the time's flown.
Should we talk a little bit about your process, the way, you know, you do your research, and as Dinah said, the story always comes out of the research, doesn't it? It just kind of, it's almost magical the way you pick up a bit of this and a bit of that you want to include, and the story just starts taking shape in your head, really. But from there, do you write a very clean first draft? Or I know Tracy, for example, because we've talked about this, you just get your first draft down really quickly and then you're brutal with it.
Yeah. I have found before I was published, when I used to be desperate to be a writer, any idea that I had, anything I tried to write, if I actually used my conscious brain at that very early stage, I would just choke. I would, write a couple of pages or a few paragraphs or whatever, read over it, and my academic former editor's head would just go, oh God, it's terrible, oh it's awful, I can't write, I'm a disgrace to literature, and then I would stop and that's no good. You don't get anything done that way. And then I read something years ago about being able to give yourself permission to write rubbish, and not to expect a first draft to be a final product, because they are two different things, but you can't get to the one without the other. And that was just, it was one of those penny drop things. I read it and I thought, of course, haven't I been stupid? So from then on, my first draft is a very organic channeling kind of a process, and I just sit down with really only the very, very loosest of ideas at the outset. And before I know it, my fingers are moving on the keys and I've got thousands of words appearing, and I just don't think, I can't afford to stop and let myself think at that point. So I stay in that lovely, creative, magical, playful space the whole way through. Then I get to the end, I switch my analytical brain back on, because that's when I need it. And then I go through the whole thing, and I'm reading as a reader, but also as an editor, and I'm thinking, what works, what doesn't work, what do I want more of, what do I want less of, where have I just lost the thread and left loose ends. And so I work through all of those things, and by the end of the second draft it's usually in pretty good shape, and I can send it off.
Can I just say, in relation to what you're just saying, Linda Hill just asked, are writers born or made? And you sound very much like a born writer.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, I don't know. I think that if somebody has never written and comes to it later in life and desperately wants to, I think they certainly can be made. I would never say to anyone that they can't do it. But I was born that way. I was one of these weird kids. I always had dozens of imaginary friends. I was always running around after my mum, telling her stories that I was just making up. And I started writing poetry when I was 3. So it's always, for me, it's always been words and stories. They've always been in my head. I've always got lots of ideas floating around that I'm longing to write, and I haven't got time because I'm busy with this book that I'm contracted for. It's just something about the way my brain works.
I need to borrow your brain, because I need to do that. And I totally understand, and it's something I've learned through writing my 8th book, is that done is better than good in terms of the first draft, and that you have to have something on the page, and you'll go through so many iterations that it's not about losing some words that you wrote on a Wednesday morning and thought were brilliant, because they'll probably change several times before the book is published. So for me, it's about doing that initial body of research to understand that the place I'm setting my book in, the era I'm setting in. So with The Bird in the Bamboo Cage, it was sort of multi-level, understanding the Second World War, the war in the Pacific, the Sino-Japanese War, then the particulars of this Keifu school and Weishin internment camp, and drilling it down then. But I do try and write a a rough first draft, but I've realized I'm a bit of a perfectionist, and I do self-edit along the way. So I'm desperately slow because I feel I can't move on unless what I've already written is acceptable, but then I do inevitably end up changing it. So it really is giving yourself permission to write badly in order to go back and shape that first attempt.
Yeah, I think you're
telling
right.
yourself the story to shape it into this polished version of those rough diamonds that your readers hopefully will then read, you know, when it's published several years later. But it's a struggle. I need
And also, mine all have a social, political world in which they're set. And the Tuscan Contessa is set during the Second World War. So, and between November 43 and June 44, when that part of Tuscany was liberated. And so there is a timeline that's outside of the actual character's world. And all my books, to some extent, The Separation, which was the first one, which is set in Malaya during the Malayan emergency, again, there is a context, and the story has got to relate to the context in which it's set. Tea Planter's Wife, there was all sorts of things going on in Sri Lanka at that time, which were included in the book. So although to some extent I work quite fast and do sort of similar to Tracy, but not quite, I'm all the time, I'm having to check where I am in relation to what's going on around, which makes it harder because there's a structure.
Yeah.
See what I
mean. No,
it's
really tricky when you're writing, you know, about, as three of us do, about real events and possibly even real people, and you've got the actual facts, and you want to be as accurate with that as you possibly can. But what I do is I then come along and I'm imposing a narrative structure on it, because life doesn't have a natural narrative structure. You've got to find it somewhere. You've got to have a beginning with your characters wanting something, wanting to achieve something, and the journey that they go on to do that. So it can be quite tricky trying to force facts into that. So I have to admit, I do cheat sometimes. I did a couple of tiny little cheats in Jackie and Maria and The Second Marriage. I must remember to call it The Second Marriage, because I wanted to start it in 1957 when Maria and Aristotle met. But I wanted to include a scene that had happened in 1955 when Jackie and John F. Kennedy visited his yacht. So I just moved the visit to the yacht to 1958. But I always confess at the end, you know, if I do tinker with history like that. But you have to sometimes, because facts just don't fit the way that you need a story to be.
Because it's not non-fiction, it is fiction.
Yeah.
You know, it is made up.
Yeah, I mean, you know, you could actually write anything. You can make up anything. It's a novel. It says novel on the front, you know. It's, if you want to say that Abraham Lincoln was a vampire, you can do that.
Really good idea.
Yes, that's my next.
Who's writing that?
No, you can have it. You can have it, Hazel.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? And that's, you know, I guess we all get asked a lot, you know, about that balance between fact and fiction. Even if you're not basing your book on a real character, it's the historically authentic. Did that happen in sequence?
Absolutely.
So, and that's, I think, probably why we've all chosen to write historical fiction instead of non-fiction, because you do have that element of freedom to lend your imagination, to fill in the gap in the archive, to sprinkle some extra little fairy dust into people's lives. So I think it's obviously something we're all madly passionate about, and we must be mad to do it, I think, sometimes, but it's
definitely.
Well, listen, I think we should start taking some questions now. Does anybody have one that they've noticed that you want to answer, or
some really great ones?
I know, amazing. Hazel, when readers say your book makes them cry, how do you feel about that?
Well, do you know, I often cry when I'm writing certain scenes, and to me, I take it as a huge compliment, because it means that people have really engaged with my characters, and that's absolutely what I want to do when I'm writing. I want people to care, in The Bird in the Bamboo Cage, for example, for Nancy and Elspeth and everybody as much as I did. And I genuinely miss them now that I've left them to a degree. And when I cry, when I read a book, it means I'm really in there, in the page. So I do take it as a huge compliment. And I wonder if I should start giving samples of Kleenex and tissues with my book.
You made me cry on the top of a bus when I was reading your Titanic novel. I thought, no, don't do this to me. I literally couldn't stop myself.
Someone called Ashley, I noticed, asked a question about when each one of us realised we could pursue writing full time. I don't know how people experience.
How about you, Dinah?
Well, I just did it full time from the began because I was already retired, so easy for me.
Nice.
This is my second career, so I had a totally different career in very corporate business world until redundancy, and I had 2 small children at home, and really it was a means to an end. It was to start writing to gain some income from writing freelance about my life as a stay-at-home mom as I was, and now they're grumpy teenagers and they don't even care anymore. So yeah, I've been really blessed to be able to do this and be around my children as they've grown up, and it's a career I hope will last for a very long time. Yeah.
What about
And
you, Tracy?
for me, it's what I always wanted to do. It's actually my 3rd career, plus a lot of other odds and ends of jobs along the way. And I always wanted to be a full-time writer. I always wanted it to be how I earned my living, rather than writing in secret in the evenings and being happy and working in the day and being miserable. So for me, it was when I won the Richard and Judy competition. That gave me an agent, a book deal, a good advance, and fortunately, because Amy did so well and because of the very blessed developments that I've had subsequently, I've been able to keep doing it full time ever since, and I just really hope that continues, because I can't imagine doing anything else now.
No.
Yeah.
And what about you, Jill?
When did I start writing full time? Well, I came about it in a circuitous route because I studied medicine at university, which was completely accidental, but I managed to get out of it, and did an arts degree, and I worked in art book publishing in my 20s.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Amazing.
And then I moved to a company that was about health, and I wrote a lot of books on health, on history, some on art, and these were not writing to commission, but it was all very good training. You know, you're trained in structuring a book and keeping people's attention throughout them, hopefully. So yeah, no, that was, and then all the time I was writing my novels. In my 20s, they were terrible. They were kind of whiny, adolescent, why is my love life not working out kind of books. So unfortunately none of them have been published. And then in my 30s I joined a writing group and got people giving me proper feedback on what I was doing, and that really helped me to find a voice that worked for other people as well. So yeah, no, thank you.
Great.
Goodness, you did. There's a lovely question here. If the ladies had to live in an era that is not part of their lifetime, when would it be and why?
1920s.
So,
For the fashion?
I like the clothes. I like the clothes. I like the dancing.
Yeah.
I like the flappers. Yeah.
I think
1920s New York, so we could go to speakeasies and be there in
wow. Or Paris.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm just writing about the 1920s in Paris at the moment for my 9th book. So
are you?
Yeah,
ooh,
very
lovely.
There you go.
that's why I wrote The Girl from the Savoy, so I could just research delicious clothes and cocktails and fancy la-di-da bright young things. Great.
Yeah,
nice.
Me too for book 4, Darling Blue, same reason.
Yeah, well, I'm just coming to the 1920s for my next one, which is book 10 that's coming out next year. That's 1920s too, but they knew how to have fun back then.
I know.
Let's find a time capsule and go there. Who's coming with us?
I know, wouldn't it be amazing? Actually, the one I'm writing now, I'm still waiting for the edits on the one before, but the one I'm writing now is the 1920s, the 1930s and the 1940s in 3 different locations. And it is kind of a brain ache, you know, trying to, you know, I haven't done that before. So I'm feeling a bit like one step forward, one step back, and that free flow of writing is missing at the moment. But certainly so far, I've really enjoyed the 1920s.
Yeah,
right.
All 3 eras have fabulous clothes, actually, don't they?
Yeah, they do.
30s and 40s.
I love 1940s clothes as well.
Yeah. And hair and makeup.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Cocktails,
The glamour.
Victory roll.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What authors, this is from Valerie, what authors have inspired each of you the most?
Oh my goodness. So
There's too
many,
aren't there? You know, you kind of...
So many.
I get inspired all the time by different authors who do very different things from me.
Yeah.
You know, I find, oh God, how have they done that? You know, and that's really interesting. It doesn't matter what it is. And I think it's an ongoing relationship, because reading is an act of empathy. And you know, you empathize with the characters, you empathize as you're writing with the characters. And so I find that any author who writes characters that I can really empathize with, I'm inspired by.
Yeah. I remember reading Sebastian Faulk's Birdsong, which was back in the 1990s, and it was the first time I realized how a dual narrative can work very well, you know, because I mean his First World War plot was so desperately sad. It's in the tunnels under the trenches, and you know, you'll cry buckets over that one, but he had this modern plot to give relief in it, to shine light on, because of course people in the First World War plot don't know the picture of what's really happening, so you need showed me how that could work. So that was quite influential. Another one that I absolutely loved recently was Paula Mclean's The Paris Wife, where she writes about Hadley Richardson, Hemingway's first wife. A woman that history's kind of forgotten, and Paula Mclean's brought her just vividly to life, and also Paris at the time, and the struggles of being with this writer. He wasn't yet published at that time, and she was trying to boost his confidence and bolster him up. And it really made me think about, oh, I'd quite like to do that biographical fiction thing where you take a woman that's interesting, that hasn't been written about so much, and step inside her shoes and figure out what made her tick. So that was really influential on me.
I had a similar experience with Philippa Gregory's The Other Boleyn Girl.
Oh, yeah.
And it was one of the first novels, and when I started writing, I didn't understand genre, so I didn't know I was writing something called historical fiction. I was just writing a book set on the Titanic. But before I wrote that book, I read The Other Boleyn Girl, and it really, similarly, Jill, it really opened my eyes to stepping into somebody from history but making them feel contemporary. And that way that she wrote that book, of if you're in the corridors of the Tudor court watching and listening, and I didn't know you could do that. I didn't know you could make up words that Henry Tudor had said. So that really vividly unlocked something for me, and certainly set me off writing historical fiction. So I'd have to say that was hugely inspiring.
And there are so many, as Dinah said, so many different people doing different things. And for me, I think a really big influence was Dickens, to look at older fiction, because of his just audacity with language and characters. And he would write the most outrageous things with so much humour and so much panache. And he didn't, you know, you can tell he just wasn't somebody who kind of second guessed himself and thought, oh, perhaps I've gone a bit too far with that. It was just so lavish and out there, and I love that. But then, by contrast, one of my favourite contemporary authors is an American writer called Elizabeth Berg, who writes stories about regular women in regular life in small town America. And her gift, apart from amazing psychological realism, is to be able to write about the most mundane, everyday situations, details, but with such poeticism, you know, whether it's the light falling through the window onto a bowl of plums or whatever it may be, so that it really is that thing about making the ordinary not just relatable, but beautiful and even transcendent. So, and those are just two examples, but I could go on and on and on.
I think we're all a bit like magpies, aren't we, really? I mean, we're instantly attracted by the shininess of everyone else's writing, and it's,
I know.
We love what we do. And how many times do we read a line in a book and you just have to stop and read it? It's so beautiful, how good, it's so clever. It's that wonderful connection with other writers and that appreciation for how much work has gone into getting that sentence right. So I think hopefully we're all inspiring each other all the time, because I love seeing how other people do it.
Yeah.
I'm listening to the audio of Richard Osman's book at the moment.
Oh, I
Gone
so
straight to
want
the
to
top
hear
of the charts. Yeah.
It's wonderful. It's really, it's so funny. It's
Oh,
a
good for
That's the
him.
Thursday Murder Club. It's about
Yeah.
a group of old age pensioners in a care home, and
Sounds amazing.
they set out to solve past murders, and then hey ho, there's an actual murder there and there.
Brilliant.
And it's just, and Leslie Mann, if you listen to the audiobook, Leslie Manville reads it, and she's so
Right.
brilliant. I mean, I've laughed out loud. I've loved it.
Yeah.
Oh,
I actually
great.
picked up a copy in my, shout out to Woodbine Books, my local bookshop, and I walked in to pick up a textbook for my son, and it was on the front of the desk, and I said, oh, I'll take this, it's been out of stock everywhere. And it's a signed copy, and apparently they're like gold dust.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
The signed
Excellent. That's good.
copy, yeah.
Well,
So,
he's been
How wonderful.
number one for 2 weeks, top,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
Great,
in,
isn't
in
it?
the UK. Yeah, amazing.
Yeah.
Debbie
I'm busting
Leslie,
to get hold of that.
sorry, Debbie Leslie is asking us, when you write, do you make a conscious effort to describe the setting and or people so that international readers will have a better understanding? Because I think all of us are published in lots of different countries and translated into different languages. So are you describing, explaining the setting as you go along?
I do, but not because it's international, but for any reader, because, you know, I set my books in India and Vietnam and Cheltenham. And, you know, the majority of people haven't necessarily been to all those countries. So it's not really for international readers. It's just for, you know, to make your book interesting and compelling so that the location feels real, and so that you can picture the characters. You know, have they got blonde hair? Have they got dark hair?
Oh, sure.
Do they always frown? You know, are they light-hearted? How do they approach life? And what do they feel about where they're living? You know, do they feel uplifted by the world they're in, or is it depressing? Or, you know, it's part of any book to some extent, isn't it? I think.
It is, yeah.
But just a brush stroke, you know, we're not writing a travelogue. I mean, in yours, Dinah, I absolutely love in the Far Eastern ones how you can conjure up atmosphere, and you know, you're very knowledgeable about the types of birds and plants of Malaysia and Vietnam and Sri Lanka, it seems to me. I thought, and it just creates an atmosphere.
I just look them up. I don't know anything.
Oh, do you?
I don't know anything.
I thought you were some big...
I don't know anything about anything. Every new book is about something I knew nothing about before. Vietnam, French War with the Vietnamese. I didn't even know it happened, let alone everything about the birds that were there. It's the research.
I think it's amazing, isn't it, what you can research. I think I said this before in another of our chat we did, that you know, don't fear what you don't know. I mean, I really enjoyed researching China and actually describing the landscape so different to, I mean, I grew up in Yorkshire. I now live in a rural setting with tractors that bring down your internet in Ireland. So to describe China and the landscape my characters are seeing was a real challenge, and going back to something Tracy said at the beginning, really daunting and really sort of overwhelming. Can I do this? And I think it's putting that on the page as part of the story, as part of the narrative, that you need to bring your reader to that place, whether it's China or Cheltenham or
wherever,
Yorkshire, or Jackie Onassis on a yacht in a beautiful setting in the Mediterranean. You know, we have to evoke that on the page, and it's a lovely part of writing, I think.
And I think for me, and I'm sure it's the same for all of us actually, having that kind of writer sensitive temperament, I am very sensitive to landscape, to my surroundings, and I can be very uplifted or very depressed by what's going on around me. And so it would be very hard for me to write realistic characters without really bringing their settings to life, because place is like another character.
I had a writer once, a gorgeous friend, Monica McInerney, is currently in Australia at the moment, hasn't been home to Ireland since the whole of lockdown, and she launched The Costingly Secret for me, and I'll never forget, she said I was like a literary David Attenborough, and it was one of the best compliments I've ever had. Because it's that connection with nature and landscape and wanting to replicate that on the page. So yeah, I should put that on a little plaque somewhere.
Yeah.
I think
That's lovely.
Going back to something you said, Hazel, though, do you not feel daunted? I feel really daunted at the start of every novel. I look at it and I think, oh my God, I'll have to know about this. I'll have to find out about that. I don't know if I can do it. I actually don't think I can manage it this time. And then you just have to push through that feeling and do the research. And
Yeah.
you must have felt that with, approaching such well-known characters. You must have felt that with Jackie Kennedy and Maria Callas. How did you push through that?
I just read all the biographies and all the material I could find and letters that were online, and kept reading until I found a version of each of the women that made an emotional sense to me, that I could feel that there was a truth in it. And different biographers take different angles, so that you'll get all kinds of different things. So I'm not saying this is the absolute truth about Jackie Kennedy. I've discovered it myself. No, I've taken all the facts and come up with a version of her that I felt I could explain the difficult decisions that she made in her life. So it's very enjoyable, but it's very daunting, especially, when I'm writing for the American market about American royalty, which she is over there. But in the Greek market, Maria and Onassis are they're Greek royalty. I mean, they're absolutely revered over there. When we visited Scorpios, they have statues of Onassis in the street. So, think what you like of him in terms of, he was clearly a womanizer. He was clearly not very kind to the women in his life, but he did a lot for his country.
I think I liken it to stage fright, when stand-up comics or actors take to the stage, and they'll always say, if I didn't feel nervous, it means I don't care, it means there's something wrong. And I think that natural trepidation when you embark on a new book, and it's that imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
Oh God, yes.
Absolutely. Talking about imposter syndrome, my sister has just asked, how do you cope with negative reviews? Do you read them? Thanks, Fiona. We don't do that.
You don't actually have to cope with negative reviews.
I mean, it's part of the territory, isn't it? And I think for me, reviews really are for readers, and I've learned the hard way I always respect everybody's opinion. They're absolutely entitled to it, and when you put your work out there, you can please some of the people some of the time, etc., etc. But I think you've got to have a certain distance from reviews and sort of get on with the book. You've got to.
Yeah, because otherwise you're pushed from pillar to post. I don't like this. I don't like that. I like this. I don't like that. You'd go insane.
You can't react.
No, you can't. I listen to my agent. I listen to my editor. And that's it, And if I had maybe, I don't know, a whole series of reviews that said the same thing, then there would be something wrong. But it's never like that. Yeah. There's always 5 stars. There's nearly always 1 star. There's everything in between. And if you look at everybody's books, it's the same pretty much for everyone. So I think you're absolutely right. Reviews are for readers. I read reviews of books I might buy, but I don't read my own reviews.
Yeah,
and I think you've got to take solace in, if I ever did sort of dare to look at some of my reviews, I think you equally need to go and look at reviews for a book you adore.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh no, that's
you find someone, the book that you've just loved and has touched your heart, and you're telling everyone about, and someone's, 1 star, and they hated it.
Yeah. And I think as well, if you're a professional writer or just somebody that wants to keep writing and doesn't want to be tripped up, like the overthinking for me, reading bad reviews would trip you up, because we're all human, and it's like Julia Roberts says in Pretty Woman, have you noticed that the bad stuff is easier to believe? So I think you could read 10 superb reviews and 1 bad one, and it's the bad one that feeling would stay with you. So why would you already know, as Hazel said, you already know that not everyone is going to love everything you write. How could they?
So why would you hurt
just
yourself?
Bear in mind that that's out there, and get on with what you're doing, which is writing.
Quite right.
If we write about people who are alive now, do we contact them first? I wouldn't write about somebody who's actually alive now because of the libel laws. I'd be a bit alarmed by that.
I've never written about anybody directly who's alive now, but interestingly, and I know we're just about to run out of time, when I started to write The Cottingley Secret, I inadvertently found the daughter of Frances Griffiths, who's the little girl who took the alleged photographs of fairies. And I was a little worried because I didn't know how she would react to somebody telling her mother's story. And actually it turned out to be the most amazing thing. And she was wonderfully supportive and gave me lots of help. So that was a really good example of finding a connection, somebody you're writing about, but it can lead, as you said, Gill, it can lead to very difficult situations.
Yes. When I wrote The Affair, which is about the making of Cleopatra in Rome in 1962, I checked really carefully on IMDb, the movie site, about who had worked on it and who was still around. And I thought I'd covered all my bases, but after it was published, I got an email from the wife of the director, Joe Mankiewicz, and her name's Rosemary Mankiewicz, and she'd read it, and I thought, oh no, because I'd written, she actually had an affair with Joe during the making of the film, and she ended up marrying him afterwards. And but fortunately, she approved of it. But that was a risk there. Yeah, when we start writing in more modern times, this will become more and more of a risk. I did really love writing in the 1960s, though. Would any of you go that modern, do you think?
Yeah, I would. I wrote a book. I wrote the Hourglass book 3, was set partly contemporary and partly 1950s. So that's my most recent.
Yeah.
Well, that's a little bit older than the 60s, but yes, I would do 60s just for the clothes and the music, if nothing else.
I'm being told that it's time to think about winding down. Has anybody want to say anything else to all the lovely people who've come along to watch us tonight from all over the place? You know, so many countries. And thank you so much.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry if we missed any of your questions. I have been trying to find them all, but really
so many great questions and not enough time, but thank you.
But we're all really easy to get in touch with on social media through our websites, Twitter, Facebook. Tracy's not on Facebook, Instagram. I'm on Twitter. So please do feel free to get in touch anytime and just ask directly.
Absolutely. And thank you for hosting, Gill, and congratulations again.
Cheers, everybody.
Well done.
Cheers, everybody. Hope you've enjoyed. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.